Today we will be replacing the brake rotors and the pads on a 2016 Toyota Corolla. Really quick, going through our parts, we have our brake rotors, we have our pads, we have lubricant for the brake caliper bracket, and then we also have our shims. We're also going to need a pry bar and then a 17mm and a 14mm to get the caliper and the caliper bracket off. A torque wrench is also going to be needed as there are a couple bolts that are torque specific. And so now that we have the car jacked up, we can go ahead and remove our wheels. Next up, we are going to compress the piston inside the caliper, but just want to take a quick look at these rotors. They have about 130,000 miles along with the pads, so I'm assuming they are going to be quite worn. You can feel a groove here on these rotors as well. Now, I was not able to compress the piston in here, so I went ahead and loosened this 14mm bolt on the top for the caliper and on the bottom. So I went ahead and loosened those. It's not a super high torque, so you should be able to get them off fairly easily. So now I'm going to rotate this and pull it off, hopefully, out of the way. And there is that piston, and we will end up clamping that in a little bit more later on. But now we can look at the rotor and how much meat was left on those pads. Now I should be able to just pop out my brake pads. Fairly simple. There's one, and the other one. Now if you have an S-hook to hang your caliper, go for it. I just have this string, so I went ahead and hung it such that I do not kink up my brake line. So doing a quick little comparison between the old and the new pads, you can see that these old pads, specifically the outer one, has lost a lot of material there. It starts off with about 12mm worth of brake pad all the way to the backing plate. The outer pad had about 5.4mm left. It's about 45% of the pad left, and then on the inner, we had about 7.3mm of pad left. That's about 61%. Now you might be thinking there's still a lot of life left in those pads, and yes, that is probably true that there's still some life left, but I want to go ahead and swap them out. It's been plenty of miles, so no matter how gingerly I use the brakes, I'll feel comfortable when the new ones are in there. Now we are going to remove our two 17mm bolts. There's one, and then there's another one up here, so we're going to go ahead and remove that too, and then we can pop off the rotor. And if your rotor is stuck, you can just give it a little tap. Okay, so now we're going to look at our caliper bracket. We're going to have varying levels of maintenance here depending on what your bracket and bolts look like. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've taken one of the bolts out, and I'm just going to wipe it off, inspect it, and then I'll re-lube it up. I'm also going to be checking on these rubber boots, seeing if there's any tears, making sure that they're still pliable. If you need to buy new ones, you can, or you can just reuse the old. Same thing with these clips. Mine are in relatively good condition. I'm going to reuse them, but you can check your clips and just check for rust and buildup of grime. And you want to check to just make sure that it slides pretty smooth. Also note that when you go to put this boot back onto your bolt, you want to make sure that you get it up and over this lip right here. Note that your pins on either side are going to be a little bit different. That first one that I pulled out has a little rubber band that goes around the bottom. This one does not, but I've cleaned mine up. It looks like it's in really good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and put new grease on and slide it back in. And this is the lubricant that I am using here for the job, and I'm no lube expert here, but I think that this will be plenty enough for us. Go ahead and slide that back in. Again, remember, you have to bring this rubber boot, maybe, up above, there we go, up above that lip. Slide it on, nice little turn, make sure it's good. Slides in and out, okay, good to go. All right, and so now, looking at our old pad, we're gonna go ahead and get our new one prepped. So I went ahead and put our clip on. And now when it comes to the shims, the kit comes with a grease to put on. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply it to both the front and back of the first shim, and then on the back side of the shim as well. All right, now we have both of our shim kits on our new pads. We're gonna go ahead and install them. Okay, now I went ahead and compressed the piston for our brakes, trying hard not to pinch the brake line there, but I used 2 C-clamps in order to press down that piston, and that is gonna help with sliding everything back together at the end. And of course, before we put the new rotor on, we are going to spray it down with some brake cleaner just to remove that layer of goo that they put on the brake rotors as they ship them. And now we have the new rotor on, and I just slipped a lug nut on just to keep it in place. Alright, so now with the top and bottom 17mm bolts in place that hold this bracket, we need to torque them to 79 foot-pounds. Alright, there you can see we have it set. Let's run it down. Okay, now our caliper bracket bolts are tightened to 80.3 foot-pounds on the bottom and 80 even on the top. Let's slide in our pads. Alright, now we got both the new pads in, and then just make sure that they are flush against that new rotor. I have no idea what knot I used to tie up the caliper, but after about 5 minutes, I have it undone, and we're going to slide the caliper back on and tighten down our 14mm bolts. So now we have 1 and 2 hand tightened, and I'm going to torque these down to 26 foot-pounds. So now at this point we have our caliper back on. Those 2 14mm bolts were torqued to 26 foot-pounds. The last step here is just to make sure everything is, I guess, at least spinning a little bit. You're going to hear some rub as you spin it. It's just the pads rubbing up against it. It is okay. We're going to put our wheel on, and that's going to be at 76 foot-pounds. And with that, we should be good to go. And that wraps it up. Didn't take too terribly long. It's a fairly easy job. So hopefully this video helped you guys out with changing out the brakes on your 2016 Toyota Corolla. With that, I'll catch you in the next one. All right, now our caliper